Sam Wilson debuted in Captain America number 117 back in 1969, and has the distinction of being the first African-American superhero in mainstream comics. Black Panther, who predates him, is the first African hero in mainstream comics. Gene Cohen had this to say about the Falcon's creation. In the late 1960s, when news of the Vietnam War and civil rights protests were regular occurrences, and Stan, always wanting to be at the forefront of things, started bringing these headlines into the comics. One of the biggest steps we took in this direction came in Captain America. I enjoyed drawing people of every kind. I drew as many different types of people as I could into the scenes. I illustrated and I loved drawing black people. I always found their features interesting, and so much of their strength, spirit, and wisdom written on their faces. I approached Stan, as I remember, with the idea of introducing an African-American hero, and he took to it right away. I looked at several African-American magazines and used them as the basis of inspiration for bringing the Falcon to life. The Falcon proved popular from the outset, which is why there was such backlash when he received a retcon that took him from kind social worker to street thug. It didn't go well, and people like to pretend it didn't happen, until they wouldn't let us. Thanks, 2010. Sam Wilson would take up the mantle of Captain America for a bit, but would become the Falcon again with the return of Steve Rogers, or rather with how they resolved the Steve Rogers Hail Hydra debacle. Number 9. Misty Knight. Misty Knight first debuted in Marvel Premiere number 21 back in 1975, but would retroactively be said to have appeared as an unnamed character years earlier. She was largely inspired by the blaxploitation era at the time, hence her kung fu skills and bionic assets. Fun fact, her and Iron Fist had the first interracial kiss between superheroes in mainstream comics in 1977. Misty Knight was on the rise in the police force when an explosion took her arm, and she got a cool metal one instead from Tony Stark, and so she joined the Metal Arms Club. She and Colleen Wing would take on crime and have a detective agency called Nightwing Restorations. It was all too cool for school. Misty Knight needs more cred and highlights. More bionic arm action, please. Number 8. John Stewart. Now, John Stewart, the Green Lantern, debuts in Green Lantern number 87 back in 1971 or 1972. It's not quite clear if it was December or January. And he is the first African-American superhero over at DC Comics. He would go on to become a beloved Green Lantern thanks to his unique approach to his secret identity, which was ultimately to abandon it and go around unmasked to show people in his community that you could do it, you could be a hero. He also just had his act way more together than Hal Jordan at the time. That man was a mess. One of his creators, Neil Adams, stated, "We ought to have a black Green Lantern. Not because we're liberals, but because it just makes sense." John Stewart would even become the Green Lantern for some thanks to the Justice League animated series, which for many was their first introduction to these characters. John Stewart, definitely a welcome addition to the core of way too many humans protecting one planet in the entire galaxy. Go Green Lantern Corps. Number 7. Blade. Blade first debuted in Tomb of Dracula number 10 in 1973. And vampire hunting is just cool. From the start, the fact that Blade was a black man was taken into account. In a 2003 interview, Gene Cohen stated on his creation, "Marv told me Blade was a black man, and we talked about how he should dress and how he should look, very heroic looking. The blades, that was Marv's idea, but I dressed him up. I put the leather jacket on him, and so on." Blade proved popular and would actually end up adapted in a series of films starring Wesley Snipes, which some superhero historians claim don't get enough credit as to their place in the superhero cinematic landscape. Blade actually had a resurgence in general in the 90s. Vampires and associated lore are like that. They come in waves. Sometimes you barely hear about them, other times there's no escape. Blade's name is actually Eric Brooks, but I mean, why call him that when you can call him Blade? He's also part vampire, just everything about Blade is cool. Number 6. Black Hammer. Black Hammer is an interesting outing. It's a series created by Jeff Lemire that initially centers around a group of heroes trapped in a small town after saving the world. They can't leave, as evidenced by what happened to the leader of their group, Black Hammer. Now, even though Black Hammer isn't the main character at the series' outset, his presence is definitely felt, and as the series goes on, you learn more and more about him. He's a Thor type of hero, though he himself is not a god. He wields a hammer that brings him in league with them. However, despite this, he strives to keep a hero-life balance, and is an inspiration to his daughter, who would take up his mantle as the second Black Hammer. Black Hammer also had a lot of spin-offs and took quite a while to come out. It's one of those series that has a polarizing ending as well. Number 5. Mr. Terrific. For this, we're talking about the second Mr. Terrific, Michael Holt, who debuted in Spectre number 54 back in 1997. He becomes Mr. Terrific after being inspired by the story of the first Mr. Terrific, as told to him by the Spectre as he stands on a bridge contemplating suicide. Michael Holt will be one of those characters who would just get more and more fleshed out. Yes, he was a genius, an entrepreneur, and all that good stuff, but he also had something all good characters need: flaws to balance him out. Why was he on that bridge? Well, because he got into an argument with his wife about his atheism versus her faith, which made her late for church, and she got into an accident on the way there, which would cause him to have a whole crisis. Mr. Terrific would go on to become a key member of the JSA, and he has found his way into adaptations. He may not be the best known out there, but for those looking for someone they may not have seen before, Mr. Terrific is one to watch. Number 4. Jack in the Box. There have been a couple of Jack in the Boxes over in Astro City, so let's start with the first, Jack Johnson. He was a toy inventor in the 60s who broke down racial barriers to rise in the ranks of a prominent toy firm, only to be disillusioned when he realized his inventions were being used for criminal purposes. After protesting got him fired, he adapted his inventions as a weapons arsenal, first just taking on the company, which had also kidnapped his father, but then expanding his operations to protecting more of his area of Astro City. His son would take up his mantle years after his death, becoming the second Jack in the Box, but would end up having to decide between his superhero career and his family when he met future versions of his children destroyed by his heroic legacy. It was all really compelling, honestly. Check it out if you have the chance. Number 3. Spawn. Spawn is Albert Francis Simmons. He was created by Todd McFarlane and given life after he broke away from mainstream comics, even though he had had the concept for Spawn brewing for some time. After he is murdered by his best friend, who also marries his wife, that's ice cold, he makes a deal with the devil and becomes an agent of it. Memories stripped and faded, but things break through and Spawn cannot be contained, and he finds new purpose in life as an anti-hero, with an awesome cape. They have done more adaptations, and McFarlane one day hopes for another crack at another movie. Number 2. Cyborg. Victor Stone, great name by the way, is transformed into Cyborg after a horrific accident that leaves the majority of his body destroyed. His father saves him using technology he was working on. At first just high-tech, later on apocalyptian tech, for New 52 purposes. Cyborg would first be seen on the new Teen Titans and would have a compelling struggle, having to go on with all these attachments and abilities he never asked for, divorced from the life he had expected and for a time the only one he wanted. Cyborg has become a fan favorite. He would be added as a core member of the Justice League during the New 52, but there are mixed reactions to that in the long run, as many miss the relationships and dynamics he had with the Teen Titans. Number 1. Luke Cage, aka Power Man. I don't know, I mean his real name in my opinion is cooler than Power Man, but Luke Cage has another distinction. He was the first African American character to be featured as a protagonist and title character of his own book. So no starting off somewhere else, just bam, straight to the cage. Luke Cage, hero for hire, but it would be renamed Luke Cage Power Man, and then eventually Luke Cage and Iron Fist when the blaxploitation era ended. Or began to fade rather, which was what had been keeping both those characters afloat. They were paired together to try and save them, and it worked. Carl Lucas is born and raised in Harlem and betrayed by friend William Stryker, because don't trust people named Stryker over in the Marvel Universe. Don't do it. He gets his powers after being experimented upon in prison. Upon escaping, he decides to use his new powers to keep his neighborhood safe and make some money on the side. Luke Cage is cool and is translated well out of the era that spawned him.
Number 10. Bumblebee. Sorry Aqualad, you got bumped. Maybe I'll see you in part 3, but I'm going to talk about Bumblebee because I find her story more interesting. Karen Beecher was actually the scientist girlfriend of Harold, a member of the Teen Titans. Being the amazing girlfriend that she was, she decided to make a super suit so she could fake an attack on the Titans to make her boy toy look good. It worked, but she later fessed up and ended up joining Titans West. Sadly, her physiology was later altered by the Zeta Ray, shrinking down to 6 inches and requiring special medicine to prevent her heart from arresting. What a roller coaster. Number 9. Frozone. With The Incredibles 2 fast approaching, I know I can't be the only person with Incredibles on the brain. And of course, Frozone, voiced by the incomparable Samuel L. Jackson, was one of the best parts about the first movie. With the powers of ice manipulation, basically a black Iceman, he was a super useful hero in his day. However, he'll probably be best known not for his powers, but for his classic line, "Where is my super suit?" Looking forward to some more Frozone in the next film. It looks like he'll be getting a bit more screen time, which is great. Number 8. Hancock. Yep, Hancock's another one that's a bit out there, but I really wanted to expand somewhat outside of comics for this video. Hancock was the incredibly reluctant superhero known for his alcoholism and lack of respect. Thankfully, later on he gains a sense of duty thanks in part to the discovery of his female counterpart. Spoilers. He had all the usual superpowers, strength, speed, flight, invulnerability, yada yada yada, but his attitude really separated him from other heroes. He had amnesia, only later learning that he was a member of an ancient race that had been previously revered as gods. The movie wasn't super well received, but personally I thought it was great to see someone so damn cynical as a superhero. Number 7. Icon. Augustus Freeman IV was created by Milestone Comics, a company led by a team of African American artists and writers that strove to increase representation of minorities in comics. Icon might be a bit of a cheat since he's technically an alien, but he took the form of an African American man when he came to Earth, so I think he counts. Icon is kind of like a black Superman, minus the more ridiculous powers. He comes from another planet, he can fly, he's invulnerable, he has super strength, just like Supes, as well as the ability to manipulate positrons to shoot energy blasts. But his invulnerability isn't nearly as ridiculous as Supes, and he doesn't turn back time by spinning the Earth the other way, so he's got that going for him. And if I'm talking about Icon, I can't forget number 6. Rocket. Raquel Irvin is a sidekick of Icon, originating in Milestone but later going over to DC alongside the other Milestone characters. She uses the alien inertia winder from Icon's ship in her heroics, which gives her special powers including flight and an inertia field. The inertia field is pretty cool. It lets her absorb and redirect kinetic energy used on her, allowing her to put out more power the stronger her enemy is. She clashed with Icon fairly often because she had a much more liberal viewpoint than him, and it's kinda nice to see a sidekick standing up to their hero so much. Number 5. Invisible Boy. Yeah, it's time for some mystery men. If you want to hear more about them, check out our video on the funniest superheroes. Invisible Boy, as you've probably guessed, had the ability to turn invisible, but with one caveat. He can only do it when nobody is looking. Is this a metaphor for the plight of the black man in a society where he can feel ignored by those in power? Probably not. I don't think Mystery Men was that deep, but he's pretty funny. Number 4. Falcon. I suspect many viewers will know Falcon from the recent Marvel movies, but Sam Wilson has been around since 1969, making him the second mainstream black superhero. Pretty impressive. He acts as Cap's partner in, well, I was gonna say partner in crime, I guess partner in crime fighting, but with the help of his jet-powered wingsuit. Coolest thing about him is that in the comics he actually has a psychic connection with his bird Redwing thanks to the Cosmic Cube, and later can actually link up with any bird in the world. Plus, he later went on to become Captain America himself, yet another amazing accomplishment. And hey, if I'm talking about Cap's black friend turned superhero, I'd better talk about Tony's black friend turned superhero. Number 3. War Machine. War Machine is definitely one of my faves. Sometimes I actually prefer him to Iron Man himself. James Rhodes is a staple of the Iron Man comics, and he actually took on the role of Iron Man when Tony wasn't able to for a time. However, the helmet cybernetics weren't properly calibrated for his brain, which started messing him up a bit. But later he got a new, totally awesome set of armor with loads more firepower than the usual suits, which let him take to the skies as the incredibly badass War Machine, and I love him. Number 2. Static. Not gonna lie, I had no idea so many people loved Static Shock until I saw the comments from last video, but I was pleasantly surprised. Guess the show was a lot more popular than I thought. However, for those who don't know, Static was another creation of Milestone Comics that went on to be published by DC. Virgil Hawkins gained electromagnetic powers when he was exposed to chemicals after inadvertently stumbling into a gang war. He went on to join the Teen Titans, although he's best known nowadays as the star of the Static Shock cartoon. Could talk about him for hours, but I gotta move on. Number 1. Cyborg. Yep, it was tough leaving Cyborg off the last list, but you guys definitely made it clear that you love the guy, and frankly, I do too. Cyborg has been a staple since he was introduced in 1980. After a tragic accident, Vic Stone was saved by an experimental procedure that replaced many of his body parts with cybernetic enhancements. While this caused him some understandable distress, he ended up using his powers to do a hell of a lot of good, and became an awesome hero on the Teen Titans and later the Justice League. Booyah! Number 10. Black Panther. With the Black Panther movie on the way, comic fans everywhere have T'Challa on the brain. He was pretty revolutionary in comics though. Not only was he the first mainstream black superhero, but he actually got his name before the Black Panther Party got theirs. So he was the OG. T'Challa is a really sick hero, both as the powerful and talented chief of the Wakandas, and fighting crime with the help of his vibranium suit. Definitely the coolest looking hero in the MCU, and his African origins were quite unique in comics for the time. Number 9. Riri Williams. Riri definitely has her haters, but that doesn't stop her from being an awesome character. Riri came onto the scene in some pretty turbulent times, having essentially replaced one of the most popular Marvel heroes ever, Tony Stark. And the fact that she was a black woman made it even harder for some fans to accept her. However, she's really impressive. She's super smart, incredibly creative, and did I mention that she built a frickin' Iron Man suit in her dorm room at age 15? Yeah, she clearly knows her stuff. So to any Riri haters out there, give her a chance. It's not like Tony was gone forever, and she definitely adds a new dimension to the comics. Number 8. Blade. Blade might be pushing the definition of superhero, but I won't be doing a top 10 black anti-heroes list, so he's gotta be on here. Blade is a quasi-vampire who goes around and hunts down vamps. Using a plethora of wicked weapons, including his signature double-edged sword, his comics have some of the best hack and slash action out there. Now, The early Blade comics are not the most racially sensitive. He was kind of a walking stereotype in looks and the things he says. He was even trained by a black jazz trumpeter. Pretty cliche. I mean, it's not as bad as this, but it isn't great. That said, he was totally awesome, and the comics do get better with this, so I'll take a bit of early stereotyping to get a badass protagonist in the end. I say that like it's up to me. Number 7. Black Lightning. Jefferson Pierce grew up in the slums of Metropolis, living with his mother after his father was killed. While he had the power of electrokinesis, he was rather reluctant to use it in heroics, only being convinced to become Black Lightning when he realized the cops just weren't doing their jobs well enough. In the comics, he kept his identity hidden by hamming up 70s black stereotypes while in character, putting on an afro and talking all jive. But he's actually a really deep and interesting character with varied interests, including a love of poetry. He's also an awesome athlete, so he's physically very fit, and he can even enhance his own strength and durability with his powers. Not too shabby. Number 6. Steel. Oh boy, Steel. So John Henry Irons, and of course his last name was Irons, was a weapons engineer whose life was saved by Superman. In an attempt to make his life worthwhile, Irons decided to help fight Doomsday with a sledgehammer. Needless to say, it didn't work, but he later built an awesome power suit and became one of the 4 Supermen while the main man was assumed dead. He went by Man of Steel, which was later shortened to Steel, and he could throw down. And then he was totally screwed over when they decided to make a film about him starring none other than Shaquille O'Freakin-Neal. Ugh. Number 5. Miles Morales. Miles Morales is a Spider-Man from an alternate universe who took on the role after Peter's death. He eventually ended up on Earth 616 following the destruction of Battle World and has been a pretty popular version of the web-slinger ever since. What's really cool about him is he brings all new powers to the table. He, unlike Peter, can essentially turn invisible by camouflaging against the background. Plus, he can use bioelectrokinesis, which lets him electrocute people or deactivate technology with Venom Blast using the energy of his body. So sick. As with any superhero semi-replacement, he was met with some backlash, but he's since found a pretty nice spot on the Marvel roster. Number 4. John Stewart. No, not that John Stewart, the Green Lantern one. John Stewart was the 4th Green Lantern from Earth, having been brought on when Guy Gardner was injured. Stewart's race was pushed to the forefront in his very first mission when he was sent to protect a racist politician. While he initially seemed to shirk his duties out of hate for the racist, it was revealed that he saw through the politician's ruse. Turns out the jerk was trying to fake an assassination attempt from an African American for political gain. Classy. John ended up being a pretty great Lantern and quite the fan favorite. He's quite a bit more serious than other Lanterns since he's a military veteran, which I really like. Plus, as the master builder, his constructs are some of the most impressive out there. He might not be the most powerful of Earth's Lanterns, but damn is he interesting. Number 3. Luke Cage. Luke Cage, unfortunately known as Power Man for a time, has seen an awful lot of screen time recently with the new Marvel shows on Netflix. With his super strength and bulletproof skin, he kicked all kinds of bad guy butt. Now, as a black man in the 70s, race has always been a significant factor in Cage's heroics. It's no coincidence that this proud black man actually derives his power from his skin, and he's been rather inspirational to people of color over the years. Now, with his Netflix show drawing some weird criticism for having too many black people, it seems like the fight is just beginning for Cage. Number 2. Spawn. I know, he's probably more of an anti-hero like Blade, but I love anti-heroes and Spawn is awesome, and his skin color was actually a pretty big part of his character. If you're unfamiliar, Al Simmons became Spawn when he died and made a deal with Malebolgia to go back to Earth in a ballin' costume, and he killed criminals. A lot. Spawn was played by Michael Jai White in the '97 movie, making him the first African American to play a major superhero on film. Spawn was actually so proud of his heritage that when given a chance to be returned to a human body, he refused because the body was white. Number 1. Storm. Storm is one of the most popular X-Men of all time, and she's been involved in quite a few stories about racism. With the X-Men comics being so metaphorically entrenched in the civil rights movement, the black female star of the comics was in the limelight a fair bit. She was super iconic as one of the few black members of the X-Men and really one of the few black superheroes for some time. Plus, she wasn't just a token black character, she was one of the most powerful X-Men. She had amazing abilities, plus she was the head of Xavier's school and even led the X-Men for quite some time. Storm was basically the epitome of the minority as a black female mutant, and it really resonated with a huge portion of the US and the world.
Number 10. Misty Knight. Especially when you consider Misty Knight doesn't really have supernatural or sci-fi based superpowers to back her up, she's pretty impressive. Misty is a detective who started out working on the NYPD. She ended up losing her arm in an explosion and, due to her heroic efforts, caught the attention of genius billionaire Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, who made her a bionic replacement. But her arm isn't even the most impressive thing about her, not even close. Aside from her mad detective skills, she is also an amazingly skilled fighter. Misty has even studied with some of the best martial artists in the world of Marvel. She is trained with both Iron Fist and Shang-Chi, and is best friends with another extremely skilled fighter and martial artist, Colleen Wing. The two often team up together and have been known as the Daughters of the Dragon. So if you need some Colleen Wing and Misty Knight team-ups in your life, that is a comic you should check out. Number 9, Amanda Waller. Amanda Waller might not be as powerful or as heroic as some of the others listed here, but she definitely does her best to keep the world safe, in her own way. And she's not someone you should underestimate when it comes to her power levels. You've been warned. Amanda Waller is often known as the creator and overall commander of Task Force X, aka the Suicide Squad. When it comes to this team of often villainous misfits, she is the one that calls the shots and also knows how to coax her team members into doing what she wants and what she needs to get done. Amanda Waller has also been known as a skilled fighter and a tactician herself back in the day, but it's truly her influence that makes her so powerful and so scary. And friends, if you are loving this list and you want even more lists like it, or perhaps a part 3, please, then be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Spider-Man. Miles Morales is Spider-Man. I personally am ready for the day that we actually get to see what happened in Ultimates happen in the main continuity, where Peter passes on the mantle of being Spidey to Miles, who takes over as the main continuity Spider-Man in 616, like full time. Can we please have that happen at some point, because I am ready for it. Miles is an interesting Spider-Man as well, having powers that also just make him more versatile and at times even more powerful than Peter Parker's Spider-Man. He's less experienced, so he doesn't have the experience, but his powers are pretty crazy. He has camouflage powers that allow him to blend in with his surroundings, becoming basically invisible to those around him. He also has his Venom Blast powers, which are similar to Jessica Drew's, aka Spider-Woman's abilities, allowing him to shock his opponents, and so much more. Number 7, Black Panther. While we may have already talked about T'Challa on part 1 of this list, there was another hero who has also worn this mantle that I think is powerful enough to make our cut here on part 2. That would be none other than the sister of T'Challa, Shuri. Shuri actually wanted a chance at being Black Panther ever since she was little, and even trained with T'Challa to make sure her fighting prowess was where it needed to be, should she ever be called on. Like T'Challa, Shuri is a part of the royal family and the Panther tribe, so she also has many of the skills that her brother possesses. She also is known for her gifted intellect, being at a genius level when it comes to her smarts, like T'Challa. When he ended up in a coma, it was Shuri's turn to prove herself, and for a time in the comics, she was known as not only the Queen of Wakanda, but also their Black Panther as well. Number 6, Static. Static is probably the most popular character to have come out of Milestone Comics, and for good reason. Static is Virgil Hawkins, a teen superhero who is known as one of the Bang Babies. He got his powers during an event called the Big Bang, hence Bang Babies. In issue 1 of the newest revitalized Milestone series, Static Season 1, this event was modernized and turned into a protest as opposed to the original event, which was kind of more of like a gang war. The experimental gas that was used on protesters resulted in many dying and granted powers to those who managed to survive. Virgil is not just a superhero for his powers, though. He's also known for his genius-level intellect, but his powers also are pretty impressive, allowing him to blast people with electroshocks, but he can also absorb energy, use electricity to shield himself and others, and use it to take control of metal or technology. Pretty neat. Those are some versatile powers. Number 5, Cyborg. Cyborg quickly became one of the most important characters in the DC Extended Universe when Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League was released. In terms of the films in that universe, it was there that Cyborg, played by Ray Fisher, was lifted up and established as probably one of the most powerful members of the League in general. When it comes to hacking, programming, and access to the unseen digital spaces online, there is no one better than Cyborg, and this gives him a lot of power. We also see his capabilities touched upon on the smaller screen when it comes to the character, as portrayed by Jovan Wade in the television series Doom Patrol. Honestly, it was seeing all that Cyborg had to deal with and was capable of in Doom Patrol that made me so interested in reading more Cyborg-centric stories in the comics. Vic Stone is just such a powerful and brave hero overall, and for that, he definitely deserves respect. I love Cyborg. I'm sorry I left you off part 1, Cyborg. There's too many amazing heroes. They're all so good. I just want to have a list where I can put like a bunch at number 1, because there's so many of these people that I think deserve the number 1 spot as well. How about a top number 1 list? Top 10 number 1s. Number 4, Green Lantern. John Stewart has some of the strongest willpower of all of the Green Lanterns we've come to know. He has used this willpower to create all sorts of constructs and achieve all sorts of ridiculous but really important accomplishments. At one point, he uses his power to hold all of the Earth together when it threatens to fall apart. And remember when he became responsible for kind of like the death of a solar system? Well, at one point, John attempts to actually redeem himself through recreating said solar system, using only the powers of Green Lantern and his willpower. Creating an entire solar system is pretty nuts. So, yeah. Number 3, Spectrum. Also known as Captain Marvel. In fact, Monica Rambeau was Captain Marvel before Carol was. Monica, in her Captain Marvel persona, would even go on to lead the Avengers for a very brief time. Later, she would give the mantle of Captain Marvel when Mar-Vell's son surfaced and wanted to use it. Monica would go on to take up the mantle of Photon, then Pulsar, before finally settling on Spectrum. Her powers are immensely powerful and allow her to shift into any form of energy. She received them after attempting to apprehend a criminal on the seas and being exposed to radiation from one of their inventions. Monica used to work as a lieutenant for the New Orleans Harbor Patrol before becoming a full-fledged superhero and leaving New Orleans for New York in hopes that someone there could help her get a better handle on her new powers. Which it turns out people were able to do, so it all worked out. Yay! Now she's crazy powerful. She's like really, really powerful. Number 2, Icon. When it comes to milestone superheroes, probably one of the most powerful of all is Icon. Icon is basically Milestone's Superman, and the two characters have even fought before, proving that the two are pretty much equals when it comes to their power levels. Augustus Freeman is Icon, an alien from another world who adopted the appearance of the first person seen by his escape pod as part of its technology, allowing him to better blend in. Due to the time period when he arrived, he crash-landed on a plantation and was approached by a black woman who lived there and was forced to work against her will in the fields. She raised Augustus, and through the years and decades, he would live on reinventing himself every so often and claiming to be the son of the Augustus Freeman who came before him, who was really, of course, just him. Number 1, Nova. Nova is Anwen Bacane, a hero who comes from an alternate reality, the reality of New Xandar, known as Earth 94241. Her mother, Eve, was a member of the Nova Corps, and Anwen would go on to become the hero Nova, following in her mother's footsteps, also becoming a member of the Corps when Eve actually returned, as the ranks were so low and she needed recruits. She ended up proving to be more powerful than you might think, and would even defeat Thanos, who appeared to be working alongside the Nova Corps, but later revealed himself to be a traitor. He killed Anwen's mother, Eve, trapping her soul in the Soul Stone. But in the end, Anwen would get him back when she agreed to give him the Reality Stone, but had actually given him the newly created Death Stone. He had affixed the newly received stone to his gauntlet without really knowing, and as such was defeated by it. Nova's powers are all granted to her by equipment, including her Nova suit, or of course Nova Star, and the Infinity Gauntlet, which she wields. So yeah, she might not seem that powerful, and she is an alternate reality superhero who is only in like a few issues, but she does have an Infinity Gauntlet, which is pretty OP, so thought she might be a fun one to let you know about, or remind you about if you knew about her before.
Number 10. Tempest. Angel Salvador is a Marvel mutant hero affiliated with the X-Men and the New Warriors, after she was depowered on M-Day. Her mutant powers granted her insectoid-like physiology. Well, and they do now since they've been returned because Krakoa, at least I believe they have. Namely, she has insect wings which she can use to fly or to fight with, creating kinda like sonic blasts. Angel also does that too. The other Angel. Angel of the Core X-Men team, the OG X-Men team. Tempest also possesses the ability to spit acid, which I think is pretty powerful, and can definitely be a surprise to those whom she fights against who may not know about that. Even when she was depowered, Angel took up the mantle Tempest and joined the New Warriors, convinced by her lover Beak. She continued to act as a hero, fighting against the Superhuman Registration Act during Civil War, and gained equipment to substitute powers, including hot and cold generating gauntlets, which gave her icy or fiery fists, or sometimes a little bit of both. Number 9. Meteor Man. Meteor Man is Jefferson Reed, a former science teacher turned superhero and the main character and hero of the film of the same name, Meteor Man. I think that parody heroes from films should count. Guess what? Meteor Man actually got a limited run of his own comic over at Marvel around the time the film was released, likely to help boost its sales at the box office. Still though, this means that Jefferson Reed actually exists in the Marvel main continuity of Earth 616. He is believed to be super strong, but perhaps not so durable based on this run. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it, if you want that part 4, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Also, maybe share it. Maybe someone else wants to know about some cool black superheroes. Share these lists. I think that would be nice. Number 8. Okoye. Okoye is one of the Black Panther's royal guard, the Dora Milaje. The Dora Milaje was actually an old order that had been forgotten, but the King T'Challa decided to resurrect. Initially, the Dora Milaje were also made up of not just fierce female warriors, but also those considered good potential brides for the king. T'Challa, however, was not really interested in that part of the tradition. He was kinda like, that's a little weird. So he decided to keep his relations with his guard professional, at times personal, but not really romantic. Not really his thing. Okoye is known for being one of the fiercest and most trustworthy of the Dora Milaje, and is an expert fighter, master martial artist, and tactician. And in the movie, she's just a really cool badass. Every time she pops up, I'm like, yes. Number 7. Vixen. Mari McCabe is DC's Vixen. She has been affiliated with a few superhero teams, among them one of my favorites, the Birds of Prey. As Vixen, Mari can channel the energy, abilities, and power of any animal from the animal kingdom on Earth. To do this, she uses the Tantu totem, which allows her to access the Earth's morphogenetic field, also known as the Red, and through that she can connect with any animal and then basically take on their abilities. This means that there is tons that Vixen can do, and her range of abilities, strength, agility, and speed is really only limited to the animals of the earth, so she's pretty powerful. Outside of her superhero powers, Mari is also a successful businesswoman and a capable fighter on her own besides. Number 6. Aqualad. Aqualad is Jackson Hyde. He is a hero and member of the Teen Titans who is also the son of the Aquaman villain Black Manta and an Atlantean named Lucia. His mother is likely the source for the powers he himself inherited, such as his Atlantean physiology, hydrokinesis, and electrokinesis powers. Aqualad isn't as experienced as many of the others on our list, as he is a newer and younger hero, but we do know that he is destined for greatness. When we glimpsed into DC's potential future for the hero in Future State Aquaman, we learned that Jackson Hyde takes up the mantle of Aquaman following Arthur Curry, becoming the second Aquaman. He also promises to train young Andy Curry, who becomes his sidekick, Aqualass, and who further into the future becomes Aquawoman, a member of the future Justice League. And if you don't know Andy Curry, you should. She's also really cool. She's Aquaman's daughter. Number 5. Blade. Blade has been around in the comics for a long time, and if you're like, oh yeah, Blade, wasn't that the guy from the movie? He's also in the comics, and he's actually been around in the comics for far longer in comparison to when that movie came out. And while he might not be the most powerful member, he is now a member of the main Avengers team, which is pretty cool. Blade is Eric Brooks, a vampire hunter who was born born half vampire, half human. He seeks to get revenge on the vampire who murdered his mother, Deacon Frost, who caused him to become the hybrid being or dampire that he is today. Blade currently has all the powers of a vampire without really any of the weaknesses, thanks to a bite from Morbius. Thanks, Morbius. He can go out in the daylight, but he does need to consume blood to maintain his powers and strength, or more specifically, a blood substitute, which is what he uses instead, because obviously Blade's a hero, he doesn't really want to have to go around and drink people's blood. It's kind of a villain thing. Not consuming his normal blood substitute, however, can cause him to become ravenous with hunger, which could result in him losing control and attacking others in a bloodlust. So that's kind of another weakness as well. Number 4. Ironheart. Ironheart is Riri Williams, the heir to the Iron Man mantle, except instead Riri would end up taking on her own superhero name of Ironheart. Like Tony Stark, Riri is also known for her brilliant mind and managed to gain acceptance to MIT at the young age of 15. Riri built her own Iron Man armor from scratch and without direction or blueprints, reverse engineering it herself. Her first attempt at doing so didn't really give her a super strong suit, but since that first model, Riri has improved her design and now pilots a suit that is on the same level as Tony's. When Tony initially learned what Riri was doing, he reached out to help her in her efforts to become a superhero, basically endorsing her dream. She would later go on to fight alongside Tony in the Second Civil War, and when he fell into a coma as a result of that event in his fight against Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, Riri decided to carry on his legacy, becoming Ironheart and a superhero in her own right. Yay, Riri Williams. Also, where is Riri Williams? I miss her. I need to go read something with Riri Williams in it now. This just made me super hyped. Number 3. Rocket. Speaking of another thing I'm super hyped about, Milestone Comics, hello, they're back! Rocket is the sidekick of Icon, the Superman-like milestone hero who was featured on part 2 of this series, so if you want to learn more about him, check that out. Rocket is Raquel Irvin, a hero who is powerful just as a character for the fact that she was the one who convinced Augustus Freeman to become the hero we know as Icon in the first place. So thank you, Rocket. Rocket herself is just your average teenage girl, and while she is a skilled writer and gymnast, doesn't really have any superpowers of her own. Instead, she relies on her inertia belt, built with alien tech from Icon's ship and modified by another superhero known for his brilliance, Hardware. With her inertia belt, Rocket can absorb kinetic energy, defending herself against these kinds of attacks and then using that stored energy to protect herself and others using force fields, to fly, or to strike back against her foes with kinetic punches or blasts. Number 2. Manifold. Manifold is Eden Fessy, another mutant and an indigenous Australian, and I really hope I'm saying his name right. Fessy? I hope that's right. Manifold trained for a good time with fellow mutant and Aussie Gateway. Both mutants are known for their teleportation skills, but Manifold's mutant powers are not actually teleporting, but instead are his ability to communicate with the universe. Through this communication, he can ask the universe to bend itself to his will, allowing him to travel vast distances in an instant. So Manifold's teleportation is actually a result of the universe folding itself for him. The restriction of his powers being that they only work within his own universe, so he cannot communicate with other universes that he finds himself in and get that universe to bend to his will. And I don't think he can also teleport through 2 other universes, if that makes sense. He can also use his abilities to communicate with the universe and space to hold enemies in place, preventing them from moving, which I think is pretty powerful. Like, not only can you move anywhere, but you can also be like, hey, you can't move. That's crazy. Number 1. Black Lightning. Black Lightning is one of the most iconic and powerful heroes out there, which is why he takes our number 1 spots. To all those Black Lightning fans that were sounding off in the comments for the earlier parts, I heard you. I wanted to save him for a number 1, so here we go. Jefferson Pierce is Black Lightning, a hero from DC who can channel electricity through himself. He can use the electricity to attack villains with blasts, or defensively to do things like teleport and heal. Black Lightning recently in Future State even saw a massive power upgrade on top of his already impressive power set when it was revealed in Outsiders that he had actually become living lightning as a result of a magical curse, and can now exist as that form of energy. If you want to check that out, you need to go check out Future State: The Next Batman. It's not revealed exactly how this happened to Jefferson in that story, but as Future State is intended to be the future we are building to in current continuity, it's likely that we'll eventually find out how this curse happened and just how much more powerful this makes Jefferson Pierce. It looks like it makes him a lot powerful just based on what we saw him do in the Outsiders. I'm excited.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Storm. Aurora Monroe made her debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1. She was recruited by Charles and joined the team to save other original students from Krakoa. She was appointed leader after several years of hard work. Storm has been called a witch before because her powers to control the air and the elements. I mean, fair enough, right? Things go up a notch in X-Men issue 135 during the Dark Phoenix saga. Sebastian Shaw calls her a weather witch, the old WW. Now, it's not just storms and earth that Aurora can control. Even in space, she can summon natural energy. And when it comes to handling weapons, Storm is also quite experienced with firearms. She's great at handling knives, she can handle the bow staff, and was trained by Wakanda's finest in sword fighting. Not too shabby.
Number 9, Luke Cage. Luke Cage is definitely one of the toughest guys around in comics. His skin is near unbreakable, which can be powerful, but also kind of a weakness at times if for some reason he needs a life-saving operation. Aside from his invulnerability, he also possesses super strength and durability. He's been able to hold back an airplane from taking off, and even been able to dole out enough force to weaken and eliminate Invisible Woman's force fields. While we also don't talk about it as often, he's also got pretty quick reflexes, and can move fast when needed. He's caught a bullet before, which of course exploded against his skin.
Number 8, Isiah Bradley. Played by Carl Lumbly in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Isiah Bradley makes his comic debut in Truth, Red, White, and Black issue 1. After the US Army lost the secrets of the super soldier serum with Dr. Erskine, they still wanted to create more super soldiers. So Colonel Walker Price and Dr. Wilfred Nagel took 300 soldiers, including Isiah, by force and used them as subjects. It was awful. They had sent the soldiers' family members invalid letters stating that they were no longer alive. It was horrible. Only a handful ended up surviving this process, and they went on to be this covert Black Ops team. Now, after a few missions, Isiah was the last soldier left. Issue 5 opens up with Isiah suited up in the Stars and Stripes. The new Captain America was born using a triangular shield that he decorated with the Double V campaign Eagle Crest. The German soldiers thought that the Americans were bombing them because they didn't see any planes, but really it was Isiah Bradley, just a one-man army. He was laying TNT down all over, but it wasn't easy for him. It wasn't like this action cinematic thing. He was crying while he was doing this the entire time. He felt awful for what he had to do. He thought of his love, Faith, and their daughter, Sarah. He tried to save everybody held at the camp, and he was said to not have survived afterwards. In the 6th issue of Truth, Red, White, and Black, it cuts back and forth between present-day Steve Rogers interrogating Merritt on the past and what happened, and that's when he found out about the secret history of the Black Captain America for the first time.
Number 7, Black Panther. Black Panther of Earth 616 has become one of the most iconic heroes out there since he joined the MCU, and was played by the late and great Chadwick Boseman. May he rest in power. Wakanda forever, Chadwick. Black Panther is currently a member of the Avengers and funds the superhero team. He comes with many different powers, skills, and resources. He has all of Wakanda's wealth and resources at his disposal as their ruler, can call in diplomatic favors if needed, and has been granted superpowers through the heart-shaped herb, which he uses to help others and protect the planet Earth as one of their mightiest heroes. Black Panther also works amazingly hard to run the nation of Wakanda and to lead the Avengers, as we saw when we got a glimpse into his morning routine and daily schedule in Avengers issue 45 from the current 2018 run. I'm telling you, his morning routine puts mine to shame, and I feel like I work hard. I do not, compared to Black Panther.
Number 6, Ultimate Nick Fury. When he entered the Ultimates in Marvel Team Up issue 5, Nick Fury would soon take over as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. And his first plan was to bring back the Super Soldier program, which actually resulted in the creation of said Ultimates. Now, his origins are pretty intense before all this stuff too. He fought for the United States in World War II and was used as a test subject for Project Rebirth. So when he was injected with his new serum, it gave him super strength, and in turn he freed himself and other prisoners and got the hell out of without dodge. Now he's got quite the power behind those punches. He's disease resistant and he has enhanced senses. The whole super soldier package, basically. Now Samuel L. Jackson not only brought this character to life in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but when creator Mark Millar began writing the Ultimates back in the early 2000s, Samuel L. Jackson was one of his favorite actors, as he should be, so he made Ultimate Nick Fury resemble him. Jackson himself was a comic book fan, so when he saw this, he asked his agents, begged them really, to make this role a reality on the big screen. Now cut to 11 movies later, it's safe to say this is our Nick Fury.
Number 5. Nubia. Nubia is the sister of Diana, who had a complex past in terms of her comic book history. In the Prime Earth continuity, she was an Amazonian who spent a long time in captivity, being held by a man who was very unkind to her and brutally mistreated Nubia. And that's putting it lightly because YouTube. Eventually, Nubia came to Themyscira and enjoyed her life there, living free. She would go on in the main continuity to become the new queen after Hippolyta sought out a new Wonder Woman, a warrior who was the most brave of all of her warriors. Her challenge to those who wished to qualify was to look in a bin where the head of Medusa the Gorgon was. Nubia was the only one brave enough to actually look, but instead, when she did, she found a crown. Hippolyta planned to go out into the world of man, and instead of becoming Wonder Woman, Nubia became the new queen instead. Wow, I love it. Like all Amazons, Nubia receives powers of strength, wisdom, and immortality, just from her heritage. Nubia is also known for being a very gifted and skilled warrior and combatant with an indomitable will.
Number 4. Falcon. Superheroes usually don't have an easy childhood. Either they're bullied off the bat, or they're born with advanced abilities that make them an outcast, or something traumatic happens with their parents. But in the case of Sam Wilson, he grew up in a tough neighborhood in Harlem. His father Paul was a minister and tragically met his fate one night after trying to stop a fight between two gangs. Sam was only 9 years old when this happened, and soon after, his mother Darlene was attacked by a mugger and sadly didn't make it. She passed away protecting her children. Cut 2 years later, as an adult, Sam has now taken over the mantle of Captain America in Volume 7, Issue 25, back in 2014, and recently in Marvel Studios' Falcon and the Winter Soldier, he did the same. But before he got the shield from Cap, Sam watched the skies as Falcon, even having a trusty little sidekick of his own, Red Wing. In Captain America Issue 170, Sam received a harness that allowed him to fly from Black Panther. I'm so excited to see more of Anthony Mackie as Captain America. He absolutely killed it in the show. If you haven't watched it, just honestly like this video and then turn it off and then go watch it. But definitely like it first.
And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it, which honestly, I want to do more lists like this for you, so please do this. Make sure you hit that like, hit that subscribe, comment. Really, it does let us know you love this and you want more stuff like this. And I have a lot of black superheroes I want to talk about. I don't know about you, Taylor, but I got a lot. Yeah, Taylor also has a lot, so yeah. Number 3, Green Lantern. Green Lantern Joe Moline is definitely one of my favorite new superheroes and possibly one of my favorite superheroes now of all time, depending on how it all ends up going, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna go great. With Far Sector, she stole my heart though, for sure. Lantern Moline is introduced to us as being the Green Lantern of a far out sector. So far out in fact that she isn't even sure it has a number, hence why we just refer to it as the Far Sector. So if you're wondering what number it is, the Far Sector. Joe's ring is special in the fact that it doesn't need a battery to operate, it can self-charge, but the only problem is that it takes time to recover its battery stores. While initially this is considered to be a weaker kind of ring among the Green Lantern Corps, it also promises to be one that when mastered could be considered one of the most powerful Green Lantern rings ever. In other words, it's just challenging to use, but once you figure it out, you're looking at insane power levels. It's like when you play Smash Bros or League of Legends and you choose a really complicated character to play. So far, we've seen Joe manage to pull off some pretty impressive feats with her ring, and even go to places that as a human she shouldn't be able to traverse, like the City Network.
Number 2, Spawn. Coming from Image Comics created by Todd McFarlane back in the early 90s, Spawn, aka Albert Francis Simmons, was born in Detroit, Michigan. He was one of 3 brothers, and by the time he was an adult, Albert reached the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Joining the United States Secret Service, Simmons was later recruited by director Jason Wynn into this top secret covert ops division called the US Security Group. So he was already killing it before the Spawn devil stuff, but let's talk about that stuff now. Simmons and said director were getting off on the wrong foot, and Simmons was about to resign until he was seemingly killed during a mission in Botswana. Director Wynn actually sent the order. Classic. So So Simmons ended up being sent to hell because all the assassin stabby stuff. He ended up making a deal with the devil in order to get out, to become a hellspawn in order to see his wife Wanda one more time. He can alter his destiny at will. He can teleport, control nature, and can sense misery in others, including you, Paramore. I was 3 when the Spawn movie came out. I'm not gonna lie, it scared the shit out of me more than anything. I was way too young to figure out what was going on. I just saw fire and like an angry mask and I was like, I'm out of here. I'm gonna have nightmares for weeks. But now I'd love a Spawn movie. Let's bring Spawn back, like ASAP. Let's get a Spawn show.
Number 1. Blue Marvel. Someone who does not get enough love but definitely deserves it is Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel is immensely powerful and got his powers from an accident that happened during the testing of a reactor that could have helped to supply unlimited clean energy to planet Earth. Brashear was one of the scientists who had been working towards this astounding discovery and invented and ended up caught in the crossfire when the reactor unexpectedly exploded. Due to exposure, he was given amazing antimatter based powers that basically turned him into a Superman level superpowered being. Blue Marvel can emit energy blasts, can fly, is basically invulnerable, possesses cosmic awareness, and can manipulate matter at a molecular level. Oh, and he also just happens to be a genius.